BSing with
Who?
BSing with
What?
BSing with Sean K. BSing with
Who?
BSing with
What?
BSing with Sean K. BSing with
Who?
BSing with
What?
BSing with Sean K. BSing with
So yeah, this is BSing with Sean K. I'm your host, Sean Kneese, and bullshitting with Sean Kneese, in case you didn't catch the abbreviation. And on this show, I talk with people pursuing their creative and intellectual passions and living outside the box. And today, my guest is Patrick Devaney. He's an actor, filmmaker, and editor. He's primarily known for crime-based television programs, and he created Zombie Hunters, City of the Dead. And you also you co-founded Devarez Films, and you began your career as a musician, and we'll get into that like a bit too.
Sure.
And he also has written 30 screenplays and acted as general background, as well as small featured roles in over 20 major television programs. And you're currently working on New Zero, One Flash of Light, and Identity Check. That's 3 of your scripts that are in production now, right?
Hello everybody. I'm Patrick, and there's a couple of things that we have in production. Scripts that are ready to go. I wish that we had a better situation right now to do that in, but we don't. My last major short film that I came out with was Identity Check, and that came out in earlier last year, and it's still in the festival circuit. It's doing really well, considering that there's almost no audiences, but most of those festivals, including my own, are all pretty much online right now for the foreseeable future.
Oh, so people could just watch them from home,
yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I guess in a way that brings like a larger audience. It doesn't have the same in-person festivities as a film festival usually would.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I co-manage the First Contact Film Festival in New Jersey, and that's every May, and it's been going on for 7 years now. And the small theater that we had could fit maybe 40 people at the most, but we couldn't do that at all last year, so we went online. And we had over 2,000 viewers. So yeah, it was a bit of a jump, yeah, which is a nice thing. But yeah,
and horror and sci-fi is your main influence. I met you originally on the last day of a horror class I was doing, a horror intensive taught by Pamela Kramer, who's also been on the show actually. And I did a scene from The Hills Have Eyes, and I did kind of like a crazy kind of voice with it and everything. And you were one of the directors or casting directors that watch the final performance of everything, and you say you do that class a lot.
Pamela's class, yeah, I love doing that. Pamela Kramer is awesome. She's a wonderful casting director, and a fantastic acting coach. And once a season, she invites me in to see the class and give them pointers, and then we just have a discussion about things afterwards. Like I did with your class. And I think it's a wonderful thing. I don't know anything else like it. That one horror class that she does, I've never seen anything like it. So
yeah, as soon as I saw it listed there, like I knew I had to take that because it just looked like a unique experience. Especially like when I took it, it was around October, Halloween time, so it was just like a neat thing to do.
Right. Yeah, perfect timing for that sort of thing. Yeah.
So I guess we'll start at the beginning. How did you get into working in the entertainment industry? Because you do more than one thing. You've acted. You also, director, writer. So how did you get into all that?
I started out as a musician when I was maybe 11 years old. I was already forming rock bands by the time I was 12 and 13. It's funny. I just was in contact with someone from my first band from 7th grade, not even an hour ago. So that was kind of cool. She's a professional musician today. So that was really cool. But yeah, I started out doing that in high school. I started playing nightclubs when I was barely 16 years old. And I did that for a number of years. And when the music career kind of ended, I was doing lots of different jobs, but I always wanted to do something with film or something with music or combine the two. And in 2005, I started seeing a medium. People were doing some pretty well-produced things on public access. And I said, I don't know anybody in the industry. I don't know how to go about getting a contract or doing anything like that or having a film made, but I know enough creative people that we could do this. And I always wanted to see, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead as a TV series. So I said, well, if they're not going to do it and they're not going to let Mr. Romero do it, I'm going to make my own. And I got a number of people together, and pretty much everyone I asked from the beginning said yes. And we started shooting that April or May of 2006. And we were on the air by the end of 2007 in public access. And the show is still played all over the country on public access servers everywhere.
And you said that it was one of the first shows to bring that to TV, this sort of Romero style zombie thing. And then this was before Walking Dead made that popular.
Oh yeah. This was at least a year before that. We were the very first in pretty much that I know of to this day. We were pretty much the first in the world to ever do that. So that was, I loved that growing up as a kid. I've always loved George Romero stuff. All the people that I asked are all fans, so we were all into it. And we just got everyone together. One of my oldest friends, Chris Murphy, became my producer. Good friend of mine, Rick Martinez, who I'm related to. He also related to. He came right on, and we got a guy named Mike Scardillo, who's he came out of nowhere, just a friend of a friend of a friend. And he's one of the best makeup and special effects artists in New York. And it just happened, a friend of a friend of a friend. We just ask around. We rounded out with that two of my other friends, Terry and Lynette, and we had the first Zombie Hunters crew, and we started just making episodes from there.
And when you were into music, you were into the punk scene, because I know you played at CBGBs and stuff like that. And with punk, there's the DIY spirit and everything, and I noted that there's that same spirit with horror movies. So do you think that's why you were kind of drawn to the two, like punk music for music and horror for movies, because of the DIY aspect of it?
Absolutely. Back in the 80s, in the punk scene, the new wave scene, and even just like the general rock scene, everyone was just doing their own thing. They were trying to figure out as they went along. I was playing nightclubs the same time Anthrax was, these little places, everyone was doing their own kind of thing, and you had to, because there was no guidelines. There was no American Idol. There was no The Voice. There was nothing like that. You had to figure this out. You knew no one. There was no internet. You had to go out, you had to play, you had to make your show, and you had to hope that it hit. And, 99 times out of 100, it wouldn't, but you had to keep doing it. And the people that stayed with it, some of them made it. And that was the same exact thing with this. There was nothing I could do about not knowing anyone in the film and TV industry. So I just had to go and try this, and we went out there and we put this on TV, and within 2 years, we got noticed by Rob Housechild, who a friend of mine, my friend Chris DeLuca, he actually brought a lot of people around to see us, and everyone kind of passed. But Rob from Wild Eye Releasing came back about 2 years later and said, "Wow, you guys are still doing this, and it's getting better, and it's continuing." And I want to try to work this out. And he got 2 of our DVDs out. He got 8 episodes, national distribution on DVD. We were all at Monster Mania convention one night when I got the phone call that it wound up in 36 stores in one evening. So I was like, okay, this is fantastic. So this idea we had, for me, that's the same as getting a record contract. It's all over the country now, and all over the planet. So
why do you think horror has that DIY spirit too? And I guess to a sci-fi a bit maybe, but I know like horror really has like, in a lot of independent filmmakers, I feel like that's what they're drawn to, because it kind of has that, like, is it the use of practical effects, or what is it, you think?
I think in a lot of horror, it's just easier to do. It's the best way to cut your teeth, I think. It teaches you how to create tension, how to create drama. It teaches you how to use special effects. It teaches you how to do a lot of different things. But most horror films are not period pieces, so you don't have to worry about wardrobe. They're not out in space, so you don't have to worry about set building. Things like that. Like even like classic zombies. It's like zombies are just people. You don't have to make up crazy fantastical monsters like, you know, Jim Henson in Farscape, you know. You have to just, you know, do it convincingly, but, you know, these are just people. So it's, you know, if you have a slasher flick, the slasher is just the guy, you know, he's attacking just regular people in this time period. So it's an easier way to do it on a much lower budget. People are more forgiving if it looks a little rough, if it sounds a little rough, if it's a horror flick. You know, if you were trying to make, Wuthering Heights, you know, and it looked bad and sounded bad, you couldn't pull that off, you know. But if it was a slasher flick, you know, most people almost expect it to be a little bit rough around the edges.
Because the grittiest kind of adds to the feel.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does, because all those movies, I mean, you know, one of the most classic horror films of all time is Carpenter's Halloween. That was made for nothing. They had nothing. They didn't even have permits for some of the stuff they did. They would just go around and film, and they had Jamie Lee Curtis running in and out of a house, and they had no insurance. They had no nothing, you know. So, you know, and because they knew how much money they had, and as simple as that, you know. So that's kind of set the pace for those kinds of things. You know, Hills Have Eyes and those kinds of films, Evil Dead in the early 80s, those kinds of films. I mean, they were very, very rough, but they were very, very good.
So what drew you to horror and science fiction? Because I feel like they have a large following, but it's kind of like a cult following at the same time. Like it's like a thing that only, like, I guess certain people are drawn to, and then they have like really diehard fans. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. What I have found is that horror fans in general are the nicest people you're ever going to meet. And you would think that it wouldn't be that way, and everyone would be like running around and violent and stuff, but it's the exact opposite. They're caring, they're giving, they're just having fun. And that's what we do. Sci-fi is, for the most part, I find it to be the exact same way. For me personally, I mean, I grew up watching reruns of Star Trek when it was first in syndication. I was completely enthralled with a show called Space 1999 when that came out in the mid 70s. You know, 2 years later, Star Wars came out, and I was completely hooked. You know, but yeah, as far as horror goes, I mean, I've been watching horror films going back to when they were on Channel 5 and Channel 11 in the New York City area. But my mother would sit me on her lap when I was an infant, and she would have me watch first run episodes of Dark Shadows. So I'm a baby watching Dark Shadows every single day, and I did that for probably 2 years. So you know, that definitely has to have a toll. So I always like to say, you know, yeah, this is all my mother's fault.
So how did you start, how did you get into like acting and all the other, like, did you kind of just always did you just want to be in the film industry and you explored different avenues, like being in front of the camera and being behind it, or how did you I guess get into the different roles, like acting and also behind the scenes?
One of the jobs I had after my music industry attempt was I was working for a media company, and I would edit videotapes, the big, you know, broadcast U-matic tapes. And I got a feel for editing then. So one of the reasons when I was thinking about doing this kind of production, I'm like, you know, I think I could probably edit this if I learn modern systems. I already have the skills for it. I already have the mentality for it. I don't know the different programming because there was no computer editing when I was doing this. So, but I just wanted to try and create this thing. And we just got as many people together as possible to do it. I knew that I had to do everything. I had to understand everything because I never went to film school. I never worked on a set before. I never did anything like that. So I had to learn everything. So I wanted to see what I was like in front of the camera. I wanted to see if I could direct. I wanted to see if I could edit. Did I know anything about sound recording? Did I know anything about colorization? Did I know anything about this? And the answer to all of those things is no. And it's just something you learn along the way. And you just try to improve it as much as possible. But it goes back to something I always tell people, you know, if you're going to make an independent film, if you're a director, you should also act, even if it's just for a scene or two. And if you're an actor who's never directed, try directing a scene, because that mutual understanding, that mutual respect, you know, I think directors of photography should act. I think that actors should pick up a camera and try to create and try to frame a scene like a DP would. I think everyone should do everyone else's job, because you might not be good at that job or ever want to do it again, but at least then you'll understand where that other person's coming from. And that just creates a heightened level of respect no matter where you go. If you're having a hard time with the director, you could see this. Oh, I remember I had the same problem. You're a little bit more forgiving because you understand it then. So I think everyone should do everything. And that's the advice I always give people if it's at a class or people just, like this in an interview or, at a convention. Anyone that asks me, I tell them the same thing. Do everything, figure out what you like the most, and then focus on that.
So have you noticed a difference with directors who've never acted and directors who have?
Yeah, I have. And you can instantly tell who has had more experience in front of the camera to ease everybody into it and to understand what people need. One of my favorite shows in the 90s was 30 something, and it was this crazy yuppie show that I never thought I'd be into, but I loved it because the characters were so well written and the actors were just so good at it. And since then, I've had the pleasure of being directed by all the male leads from that show on various different shows. And those guys will actually take the time to explain a scene, even if it's just to background people, even if it's just to a featured person, even if it's not the lead, they'll take the time because they remember when they were there, and they'll take the extra moment for that. They don't have to, but they will. And that's a beautiful thing, my favorite director right now on the indie scene is Jeremiah Kipp. And, you've probably seen a bunch of his films. And he grew up as an actor, so he understands it. And the ease at which he can work on a huge set or a small set, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Everyone feels calm. Everyone feels confidence. And he feels like he makes you feel that he really wants you to be there. And I don't know if he would have, I think he'd still have that. But I don't know if it would be as developed if he wasn't a child actor, remembering all the things that he needed as an actor growing up and then applying that to his craft now.
So do you kind of view it as a team effort working with the actor or do you have kind of an idea of what you want the character you write to be like, or do you want to see what the actor does with it?
I often say, it's a great question. I often say that actors aren't robots. Excuse me. They're not robots. You don't hire them for that. You don't ask them to be in your films for that. You want to see what they bring to the table. And even the best script is never going to go anywhere if someone can't live that part, if someone can't be that person. And what that actually means is their interpretation of that character. Now, it doesn't mean they can change the character's motif and they can change the entire story, but little tiny things about it, they'll bring that to life. And one of my favorite parts of it is when I write something and I really am happy with how it's turned out, when I see what my regular cast and crew will do with this, when I see what my people will do with this, it's just the best thing. It's just the best thing because they bring themselves into it. And also, if you have to, they may change some things that you hadn't thought of. I always say, trust your actors, trust their instincts and what they're going to bring to this. And as long as you do that, you'll never fail. You'll never fail. But it's always a collaboration. If it's not, then I don't know what you do. I mean, I'm sure there are directors there. I mean, I've been on sets that I've seen it where it's just do it this way, read it off the page, next scene. And
I think Hitchcock was a bit that way. I think he had a very rigid way. He had everything storyboarded. He wanted everything like an exact way. I know, yeah. Right.
But he's an example of that. But the people who have worked with him, like I've heard interviews with Bruce Dern, who tell a whole other side of him, like kind of a friendly person, kind of a better person than you actually hear about. But Hitchcock was brilliant, so he could just say, I want this and I want that, and people will be lining up to be in his films. Not so much of a collaboration at that level, but I mean, I think he directed over 100 films. So it's after that point, you can pretty much say I'm pretty sure I know what I want in this. But I like to collaborate because my people will see things I won't, and I can't believe I'm the end all be all of anything creative on my set. So I always go with it unless it changes the character or unless I really hate it, which almost never happens. I'll just go with it. I'll just absolutely go with it.
Yeah, and even for me recently, I sent a script I was working on to a friend, and the script, it takes place in a realm kind of similar to ours, but like outside any time or place. So he made the suggestion that I use a different curse word, like make up a curse word to make it seem more like it's in another world. and I actually thought that was pretty cool. So I came up with shod instead of like shit. Like instead of get the fuck out of here, it's get the shod out of here.
Nice.
And like shod's like their version of hell. That's what I had.
Right.
So, yeah.
No, that's wonderful, and also it gets around censors that way. It gets better ratings at that. It's a little more family friendly if you really want that. But yeah, I mean, it also puts you in the right place. I mean, what you were doing is right. I mean, it puts you in a different mindset, and just a little tiny thing of, oh, this really isn't here. So now, since it's not here, I can expect more, and I'm going to be open to more because I don't know what's going to happen next. What's normal in this world? So as soon as you start hearing things like that, there was a classic episode of The Twilight Zone which always influenced me. It's the episode where the world's about to end in a nuclear war, and these bunch of scientists, they can escape on this saucer they made, and there's little tiny hints throughout this episode that you think they're on Earth, but it might not be, and there's little tiny things like that I love that kind of thing. So I try to plant little things like that into my films as well, just to give you the idea that this isn't actually here, or this might not be here. So go with that and suspend disbelief for a little while, and go on the ride.
So would you say writing's the thing you love the most? Like, is that your main thing? Or are you like?
I like a lot of different things, but I think in the last couple of years, writing is definitely my favorite thing, because then I can see the entire process, and sometimes the stories just come. Editing doesn't always come to me. I mean, I have a couple of projects I'm working on right now, and I'm finding that I'm struggling. I'm finding it a little bit hard to complete them, just because I can't put myself into the mindset of it. And that comes and goes, but writing, it'll just arrive. And then I got to get it down, or I have an idea and I have to start developing it. When you see it come to fruition and people read it, and then you start seeing how you're going to film this thing, that's to me, that's the best. I could be happy being a writer for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think you said that in the class too, that's the thing you love the most, is when seeing the words you write come to life, like in what the actor does with it.
Yeah. I mean, a perfect example of that is Identity Check. We had different reads for the script just to get the characters in place, because we were going to film it live. They were going to perform the entire film, and then we were going to give them a break, reset the camera, relight it, and then they were going to perform the entire film again. So what we did was we recorded 8 live performances and then edited them together as one big conversation. And I can only do that with actors who knew what the hell they were doing, because they hit the mark every single time. One of my leads, Mark Abbott, if he put his hand like this at one word, he put his hand like this at that word, 10 times that day. So it was always perfectly seamless, and everybody just knew it, how they held themselves with their expressions. My 4 leads were just so good. But in the second read, my creative partner is also one of the stars of it, Lauren Clover, and she said, I want to do this in a British accent. And I'm like, I didn't write this person to be from England. She's like, well, I'm just going to try it. And I'm like, but can you keep it? She's incredibly talented. And I said, can you keep it going? She goes, oh, I can do it. And I said, okay. And then she just read the whole thing with a British accent. And I'm like, okay, this is what we needed. I didn't see it. No one else saw it. She felt it. We went with it. I trusted her instincts. And whenever I trust her instincts, I never fail. So we just changed the character, and all of a sudden, her character was from England. And we just went with that. And it just added another layer. It was just a really, really inventive idea, and it just worked. It really, really worked, especially at the end of the film. I mean, there's she has a really great part, and towards the end, she really sings, and that accent just added to it so much.
And there's kind of a similarity to that with music, like when you're playing with a band. Like I start out playing in bands and stuff too. Like you write a riff, and then it sounds like one way on your own, but then it really comes to life like when you're jamming with other people, and like they add their own like thing to it, or they change the rhythm up, and it takes on a whole new life. Like yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about. It's almost as fluid with acting, with acting a little bit different. Like if you're jamming with someone, you can do the same chord progression over and over and over for 3 hours. and they'll find other things to put in there. You know, with acting, you're not necessarily saying the same line over and over for 3 hours, but you do fall into a rhythm with that. I mean, as an actor yourself, I mean, you've experienced that. You know, as a musician yourself, you've experienced that. It's a very similar process. I find it very similar. You know, but you also, if you were in that band and you didn't trust the instincts of the people you were playing with, you might not be as free to explore. You know, when you'll often hear actors talk about other actors and they'll say they're very giving. And it's a very good way to put it, because if I've read across the table from someone and I've felt the emotion that they're talking about. You know, I've also been in situations where I'm doing my lines and the reversal, someone's on their phone and I'm talking to a blank wall, pretending to know what they were saying. So, I mean, it's, you know, a very giving actors. I love when people are present for the whole thing. And that's part of the whole creative process.
So if one actor does a good job, then it's easier for the others to kind of do their job as well.
Absolutely. And if one actor is struggling, then there are ways to help that person, even if it's just to the end of a scene. You know, or how you know, maybe if I do, instead of just walling yourself off, like some people do, walling yourself off and saying, well, you know, I'm prepared and they're not. You know, it's just kind of like, okay, maybe what if I lead you into it a little bit sooner, and then we can, you know, and then you'll see how things flow, and then just let your people do it. You know, then if you're directing the scene and you see the actors working together and they're enjoying each other and they're helping each other, the worst possible thing you could ever do is say a single damn word. Let them do their thing. Let them work it out. Let them, and watch what they're doing, but let them work it out. And you'll always get a better performance. You'll always get a better film. You'll always get, if you're doing a play, you'll always get a better production. If people are there presently with each other and helping each other and also just, you know, into it. And that's, you know, it seems kind of obvious, but it's not always the case. So I love that. I love watching that.
Yeah, and do you think that's why a lot of directors like to use the same actors for different projects, because they get used to working with certain people and then they have that rapport? It's easier to get what they want to get out of them, or to make something better.
Oh yeah. I have a group of people who I've worked with several times. Lauren Clover, my partner's one. Heather Drew, I love working with her. Kelly Legault, I love working with her. Matt Kaplan, I love working with him. I've worked with him on several projects, his projects and my projects. There's a number of different people who I really just always enjoy working with. You know, I mentioned Mark Abbott before, another perfect example. I've worked with him on 5 different projects now. And when we go back to shooting, the first thing up, when we can all shoot safely again, and I feel confident we can, the first thing up that we're shooting is going to be Lauren Clover, Heather Drew, and Mark Abbott. You know, so, you know, with Mark Abbott as a time traveler coming back and trying to explain who he is, and everyone's kind of not really that interested. So then the rest of the story goes from there. But we already agreed that this is going to be the setup, and as soon as we can do it, we're going to start filming that one thing. It's all ready to go. It's just, you know, it's just the quarantine. You know, so it's pandemic, and yeah.
So does when you write, does your ideas come from your own personal experience but fictionalized, or is it just purely your imagination? Or
I think it's a little bit of both. I will bring ideas back up from my childhood. I'll bring ideas back from when I was younger. I'll bring up things that I thought about years ago, maybe I changed my mind about. But sometimes it just comes. We've been talking about Identity Check, and my lead, Lauren, I was driving to perform her wedding because I'm a reverend. I was going to be doing her wedding for her. And on the way, my wife said, you know, I had this dream where I went to my doctor and it was some other guy there. And she said, you know, you're not Dr. Jackson. He said, oh, yes, I am. I bought his practice and I also bought his name. So coming to me is the same thing as, you know, coming to him. And she's like, no, it most certainly is not. So I said, could you imagine that? Like if you bought someone's business and you bought their name as well, like you can be them. And then the idea clicked. And I went, oh man. So we couldn't do anything about it then. I kind of get it out of my mind because I had to do Lauren's wedding. And I went there and before the wedding even started, the whole script popped into my head. And I went back to my wife. I said, listen, I got the script. I got the idea. I got the story. I can't talk about it now because we got to do this ceremony. And I don't want to screw that up because, you know, she gets this one, you know? So, and I said, so let's just get this out. And then but then I went home that night And for the next 10 days, I did 3 revisions. And that's the story that became Identity Check, of multi-billionaires crashing and falling, and then their rivals coming to buy them and their entire personality and their identity as a human being, instead of declaring bankruptcy.
So, so like you never know where it's going to come from. I guess
I really don't. Yeah. I really don't. Yeah, it can come from anything. An idea that someone can mention something. I'll either say, well, maybe we should work on that together, or I'll say, do you mind if I run with that? I really like that idea. Or even just something I overheard, 8 years ago, someone say in a bar, and it'll just come back to me. I'll say, that was a pretty funny thing that guy said that time. And I wonder who that guy was, like a stranger to me, but I wonder what that guy's doing right now. And all of a sudden an idea will be like, this guy only went to bars and told the same joke. And it kind of like, united all these people. It's like, that kind of thing. And that just popped into my head right now. So it's like, we can do that kind of thing. So it comes from everywhere. You never limit yourself. Always take in every single thing that you have, all your memories, all your experiences, work from that. In your scripts, include things that when they say write what it really does matter. And then just incorporate as much reality into your writing as you possibly can. Yeah, just go with any idea. Even if it sucks, write it. Write every day. If you're going to be a writer, write every day.
Yeah, you have to be like a good listener and a good observer. Well, I feel like a lot of things that apply to acting also apply to writing too, because like as an actor, you have to observe people and take them in too. And as a writer, the same way. And as a writer, you have to get into the head of the character.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as an actor, I mean, if you have to have a really emotional scene, that doesn't come out of nowhere. If you have to be upset, or you have to cry, or you have to be, angry, I don't know anyone that can just fake that, or just put that face on. It's not as easy as comedy comes to some people. I mean, like, comedy's the hardest thing to do, but like everyone can laugh very easily. It's like bringing out the other emotions, the darker emotions, the most sad emotions. There has to be something in your life that you go back to. You well that up, you bring that up, and you put yourself in the mindset for it. I know that's how I've done it. But it's and that's how most actors I know do it. But you have to, without those experiences, you're not going to be able to really emote to the character. You're not going to really be able to translate that to an audience. Yeah.
And can it sometimes just purely come from imagination too, like imagining what it's like to be in that person's shoes? Like...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure, absolutely. If you're talented enough, if you're skilled enough to and creative enough to dream up something that you never experienced and empathize with someone in that situation, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing in life. It's just, to empathize with somebody you don't even know, who you never experienced their thing. It's like, okay, but this person's hurting, and that's what things are about. But if you could pull that up out of nowhere, I mean, that's a skill I do not have. But yeah, if people can do that, brilliant.
And is it hard sometimes to get in the head of the character if it's like non-realistic things happening in the script?
I think that most things are relatable. I've never been in outer space, but I've written a lot about things that go on there. But I think that when people, eventually we may be on other worlds. A lot of the same feelings that we have now, and the fears and the instincts, we're going to be carrying there. So, if you have a script on a moon base, I have one that takes place on a medical military base on a moon, a distant moon, God knows where, and the people have the same conflicts. They have the same kinds of things. So the settings can be completely fantastical, but if you're not writing where people can relate to these things, even if it's completely out there. I mean, a perfect example is Blade Runner. I mean, we don't have sentient robots running around, but by the end of that film, if you don't feel bad for them, if you can't understand why they want to keep living, it's like we don't have anything like that, but we know people who are losing their lives or watching them die, or we've experienced this. So that kind of thing, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess it can also be like in an allegorical way. We can really like how sometimes like they can dehumanize people that can be considered enemies of the state or something like that. And it was the same with the androids they killed. They were sort of dehumanizing them.
Yeah. That's that kind of thing. I mean, any totalitarian state, any fascist state, anything like that, you will find that it only works if you can pick the people that you want, bring them to your side, and then say, over there is the enemy, and they must be destroyed. And then you rally the people to destroy the enemy, even when they're not the enemy. So that's countless times throughout history. It's not just modern times. It's everywhere. It's recorded history shows this everywhere. It's something that we do, which is something, it's a whole other topic, but yeah, that's.
Yeah. And sometimes sci-fi, or I guess even sometimes fantasy, depending on what it is, can help us kind of look at our world from an outside perspective. And certain issues that happen in our world, if you put it in another world, then you can have a perspective on it you wouldn't otherwise have, because you're looking at it from an outside view.
Oh yeah, the my favorite example of that is the original the third season of Star Trek. There was an episode where Frank Gorshin is running around chasing a guy, and they are literally, one side is completely white and one side is completely black on their bodies, and you think that they're the same guys. They're trying to kill each other. And like, why are they doing this? And they say, you're the same species. And one gets very insulted and said, no, I'm not. No, I'm white on the right side. His people are right on the left side. And that's when you realize, like, oh, they really are different. They're mirrors of each other. But it was just that kind of thing. And, in 1969, I mean, that's exactly what, one of the biggest, most important things in the world, sadly, still going on today, are equal rights and the absurdity of segregation and bigotry against race. So they showed that in a very beautiful way. They got past the censors, because the censors are always like, don't talk about Vietnam, don't talk about race, don't talk about these things. So they said, no, these are aliens. And they got the message in there. That's why it's brilliant. I mean, Star Trek touched upon Vietnam, touched upon racism, touched upon all kinds of things, and the studio executives, Desilu, had no idea what was going on. NBC had no idea what they were doing until it aired, and they said, "Oh, damn."
So do you ever?
I love that.
So do you ever try to write like what you think could happen in the future, things you see, the ways you see the world going?
Yeah. I mean, one of the I've touched upon this before. One of the films I did was Impervia, and Impervia is about this very poor a biracial family with two daughters that live in this tiny little house in the middle of nowhere. And I mean literally nowhere. We digitally erased the entire planet except for their house, and about 100 miles away is this beautiful, beautiful city where the rich live. And one day a police officer shows up at the house and says, listen, I know you got nothing. This is your house. You got no money or anything, but I'm sorry. We made a new rule. You got to go. And they said, well, where do we have to go? And they said, well, it doesn't matter to us. It's just, we don't want you here. So it's four people living 100 miles away, and that still bothered them. So I wanted to get, and then the film shows into the why. But one of my influences that was forced migrations. When I was in college, I was studying cultural anthropology, and one of my final papers was on forced migrations throughout history. And I can remember growing up in Forest Hills, Queens, when I was a little kid. My dad would bring me around to all the different shops, and a lot of the shop owners had numbers tattooed on their arms from the survivors from Auschwitz and places like that. And I didn't understand at the time, when I was a little kid, why they would have that. I always remember looking at them though. And then I got a little older when I realized what that meant and the gravity of that. I mean, I don't think the gravity that's ever gone away from me. When that hit me in the head, like what this meant. The older I get, the worse it gets in my mind. And I always think, that's mentality. You grab power, bring who you want to your side, and then say, over there is the enemy. And it doesn't make it rational. It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense if you want to gain power and eliminate someone or something and rally the people together. And so this is what happened in my film Impervia. There was a distinction between the haves and the have-nots, and we find out exactly who these people are and why they're ostracized and why they're so hated and hunted down, and when they're just trying to live. And that's the whole basis of that. So yeah, I mean, things like that I think about all the time. really, because the world hasn't really changed all that much. And that could absolutely happen again. That could easily happen again. And anyone foolish enough to think that it would never go on is pretty much guaranteeing that it would. So, yeah.
Because I mean, we already have that, like you were saying earlier. You know, the demonization of the other happens all the time. People are quick to. It's easy for people to dehumanize people that they think aren't like them or something like that. Yeah.
Right. And it could be anything. It could be, you know, I always said if we were all the same sex and the same height and the same color and everything, we'd be fighting about, you know, people who had like earlobes detached or earlobes attached, and we'd be killing each other over that. You know, so it's like it's like whatever kind of slight difference, you know, it's like that. I don't know the answer to it. I think we have to get past that.
Well, it used to even happen more with different, you know, white groups like that, the Irish and the Italians and stuff like that, you know. Oh yeah. My father's first generation Irish over here. He grew up in Upper Manhattan. There was you know, these 4 blocks were the Irish guys, and those 4 blocks over there were the Italian guys, and you didn't cross over. I mean, you couldn't even imagine that in Manhattan right now, but it's exactly it. You don't cross over, and you just knew, and there's no reason, you know. And then of course all those people got married, because all my friends are Irish and Italian, so they all did eventually got together, you know. So it's all the groups in New York that don't like each other. All of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute. Then the babies are all born, and it's like, oh, okay, we're fine now. It's like, all right, you know. Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of sci-fi likes to show it that, like, in the future, it's humans are united, but then it's humans against other alien species or androids, or turning to non-human things to oppress.
You know, or different factions. I mean, watch The Expanse. I mean, there's 3 groups of humans that are always at odds, you know, and there's you know, espionage and murder and threats of war and attacks, and they're all in the same solar system. They're all the same people, but they have already separated themselves out, you know, depending on what planet they live on. So it's you know, it is interesting how much sci-fi goes into that direction. You know, it's like, now that we're united, oh, now we still have to fight, because you can do a lot with that. You can make a war movie out of that. You can make a classic Western out of that. You can make, you know, a grand journey to find my missing person kind of thing, you know, so it works. Yeah. It just, after a while, it just works.
Yeah. And so you've also done, all right, so you've done writing, directing, also music scores, right? Because I think I read that, like, so you still do music a bit, like that's still, because I know that's what you started out with. And I think last time you mentioned that you even do electronic music now or something like that. Yeah.
I do mostly EDM. I'm actually talking to you guys from one corner of my new studio. I redid the entire space, integrating brand new equipment with equipment from the 80s and everything in between. So everything I can get my hands on that works, I'm integrating it all into one whole that I can just draw from whenever I get an idea. And I've been working with a brilliant composer and musician, Bernadette McCallion, and I've been working with her forever. I've known her since we were both teenagers, but she went into filming. I went to doing music for major television shows, so that's what she was doing. So I got her hand-me-downs, you know, things she didn't want to sell, doing that. So that's how we started out. But then she started doing beautiful scores for my films, and I just saw the things she did, and I'm like, you know, I'm never going to be as good as her, and I know that, and I'm fine with that, because she's brilliant. But I want to try to do my own thing too, and just try to get back into that. In 1995, I did the score for significantly off-Broadway play called the Shadow Trilogy, which is like a Twilight Zone kind of thing. And I knew the playwright, and he said, "Listen, can you come up with some music?" And it was pretty much the last thing I'd recorded for a long time, but I did all the music and all the sound effects for the entire play. And this is at the time when we didn't have computers doing it. We didn't have, you know, I had cassette tapes of all the different things I had recorded, and then we would swap the tapes out in the sound booth at the theater. You know, so that was cool. But it gave me the bug for that. Like, sometimes I'll see a film and I'll really get into the score, but sometimes I'll see something and I'll say, you know what, this isn't the music it needed. The scene needed. It would have been better if it was done like this or like that, or it needed something else. And the more I started realizing that, I'm like, you know, I really want to start doing this on my own. I really want to at least attempt it. So I do a lot of EDM stuff. I do a lot of like 80s style synthwave and the darker things like that. Craft and Depeche Mode and all those things. I mean, like early Erasure. I love all of that so much, and I'm starting to do more music like that now. So slowly but surely, it's coming together. I mean, the studio's up and running, which is I'm thrilled. And I mean, in the background you'll see is my 1988 Mac, and there's and then over there's a computer I built 2 months ago. So it's like it's right on either side of me. It's like I got the best of all these worlds. But that's the kind of thing I want to do: incorporate all that kind of stuff, and bring my own sound to my own creations, because I'm editing my own work. I'm sometimes acting in my own work. I'm directing my own work, and so I want to. And I'm also sometimes doing sound. I mean, on Identity Check, I was the clapboard guy. So, and then I call action after doing the clapboards. So, but yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing. I want to get everything kind of as a whole, because ultimately what I want to do in this space, and ultimately after that, maybe even as early as next year, I want to start doing full scale animation here. So from that, I have to have a mastery of sound. I have to understand all those techniques much better than I do right now, so that when I start doing animations and I start doing computer work like that, I already have the voice actors. I already know the people. We can do that, but I have to understand how to do it all in studio, all in one. So that's my challenge for the next 2 years, doing more and more things like that, and definitely branching out into animation. This is why all this gear is here and everything else.
Oh, like sci-fi animated kind of stuff, you think?
Yeah. I mean, some of the scripts that I have that I can't afford to create, if I don't have backers for them, I mean, I don't. I mean, I have a script right now that can go out the door and get produced right now, but it would cost $400,000. So I just don't have that kind of access. I don't have those kind of connections yet. So some of those might be going to animation, and it just depends on how good I can get it. And then also, I mean, if I get to a point where I can't do it very well, then I'm going to talk to people who can and say, listen, you got to teach me, because if you don't, you can learn something every day. So, that's the plan. That's the overall plan of why things are going the way they are. So.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like a lot of people in the entertainment industry or the arts, they wear many hats and don't just do one thing. Like I'm the same way. I do this podcast, I act, I do voice, been getting into voice acting as well, and I write. And I also do music, but I guess right now that's more of like a hobby kind of thing. I actually been getting into like some synthwave kind of stuff too, and stuff like that also. Yeah. And, so like, how do you find, like, do you feel like you had to focus on one thing to be your niche and like put other things more on the side, or did you just kind of, is it easier to just be flexible and kind of work on what you can work on when you can, or?
Right. It's hard. I mean, when I first started doing the film work and started working on Zombie Hunters, I was doing woodworking every weekend. I was building furniture. I was working with my hands. I was building things, around the house. I was doing a lot of different things like that, renovations and such. And I love that kind of thing. And I had to choose after a while. I didn't have time for both. I couldn't be filming on the weekends and building a new table on the weekends. I only had one weekend. So the filmmaking, I really had to go in all in for it, because I had so much to learn. It wasn't something that I could do. I only started making films when I was 37 years old. So it was a while ago. And yes, I mean, like, it wasn't like, I was 19 and I had time to, I had things to catch up on, so I had to sacrifice a lot of that. But yeah, I mean, it's, if writing comes, then you go with it. Always go with what feels right at the moment. If you can do some writing for a couple of days and you're not getting an idea for a new thing, go back to your old scripts and revise that. That kind of stuff. It's you have to find time for all of it. But if you want to learn all of it, you got to spend a lot of time learning all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they can kind of overlap, like we were saying earlier before, with like acting and writing and stuff like that.
Sure, absolutely. And also just watch everyone when you're on a set. Watch what everyone does. I tell people this all the time, especially if you're doing background work. You're sitting in a holding for 5 hours. Don't read a book. Don't put your headphones on. Go around the set, watch what everyone does, learn everything, and you'll be amazed. I've stolen techniques from maybe 30 different television shows right now. Even if it's just like, how to hang a light, or how to build a set, or, at what time you take breaks, who needs to hear what. You just learn these things. So, constantly learn everything. And then the only thing it can do is make you better, no matter where it comes from.
Yeah, and I think you said you worked. I think we probably worked on some of the same. I think you worked on Mr. Robot. That was, and then you said, yeah, and then I think you said the last time I talked to you, you said that Mr. Robot is like you thought that was like one of the better written shows. You think a lot of the good writing's gone to TV, and I know you mentioned Mr. Robot. But,
oh yeah. I think there's a lot of good writing in both places, but television, I don't think TV has ever been better written than it is right now. And I don't mean like this month. I mean like the last five to 10 years in that time period. Some of the dramas that are being created now are amazing. Some of the writing, the first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, absolute brilliance. Things like that, and a lot of shows that are coming up are very, very well written and very, very well acted, and they're seasoned crews. Mr. Robot, that was a wonderful thing because it's so well written and the story is so cool, but the camera techniques to get that sense of paranoia. They would do one scene where the camera would be, the lens would be here over the main actress's face to give, while she's doing a scene. And then the next scene will do the exact same thing, but no one will even know where the camera is. Because it's like a hyper focus on her and then pulling away to see how small she looks in the scene, but like.
And then there was that one episode that was like a whole lawn shot. I think it was when the people were rioting in the office building, and there was like this, the camera just like followed the characters straight throughout like the whole episode. Yeah. It's
I've never seen camera techniques like that, and they had specialized rigs for all of this, but it moved as smoothly as any other, like a courtroom drama. I've done a lot of Law and Order and Good Wife and the Good Life, all those kinds of shows, and the cameras on the court TV shows, they're very, very smooth and more subtle, but they all work in unison. 3 cameras at once all work in unison, and the crews all work in unison. And it's 6 people for cameras. That's 18 people all converging on each other, and it's like a ballet, and it's beautiful. So no matter how extreme it is or how direct it is, that's the kind of stuff that it just adds so much to it. It adds so much to production, and the grace that they do an easier shoot is the same grace on a show like Mr. Robot, doing these crazy acrobatics with the cameras. It's $150,000 flying around on each one, so it's you got to be also careful at the same time. But they do some beautiful things, and I love watching that. I could watch that every day for the rest of my life. Those kinds of productions.
And as far as independent films, because I know that's what you love like the most, like to do and everything. Do you think there's something lost with the bigger budget productions that isn't that's lost from like the independent films where people kind of do it themselves?
I think it all matters to the film. I think there are major big production films that are amazing, that have top talent, but in front of and behind the camera, where people truly feel the story. I think it's very easy to also make a gigantic blockbuster that's nothing but robots running around and killing each other while whoever's the hottest chick in Hollywood right now bounces from robot to robot and falls down 800 feet and lives. But the indie stuff, it becomes more personal. You'll see a lot of indie films. The writers are often the directors, and then they're also often the stars, or at least they have a part in it. And that's someone like a Spike Lee. He does it to this day. He always puts himself in his movies because he wants to be a part of that. Yeah. But I think that maybe there's a little bit more of a direct thing with indie work. General, we're not getting paid to produce our own work. We're not getting, we're paying our people, but nowhere near what they're worth. I don't think I've ever paid anyone what they're actually worth, because I think that they're worth. I think all my guys are worth millions. So I wish I could give that to them, but I can't. But I think there's just a more direct care for it. You could be hired to direct a major blockbuster. You don't have to care if the costumes are all ready. There's an entire team doing that. But if you're on independent, you may have one person doing that. Like I have one Gail Gooch, who does all my costuming and things like that. But I'm lucky to even have her. So in the past, I was doing it all myself. So there's a more direct relationship to it. It's more of a familial kind of feel. And I think sometimes that definitely trumps what major Hollywood pulls out. And also you can take risks with any film. There's really no limit. There's things that'll hold you back. Like I know that from making 34-minute short films, and every festival is like, we don't know what this film is. It's not short and it's not long, so we can't play you. Right? So you run into those things, but no one put a limit on me. Like I put a limit on myself, or I put an extension on myself. But that's the indie thing. You can do that, experiment more. You don't always have a series of backers that took out loans from a gigantic bank that's saying, I want to see a return on this investment in 5 months. That's a different kind of pressure. And I think that's why the major things go more formulaic, which is why you start seeing reboots and reboots. It's much easier to get millions of dollars for something that's already been proven to work than a new concept. And it doesn't always work out, but.
Yeah, and it's also, I guess, when it's a smaller crew, it's you connect more with the crew too, right? Than you would on a bigger production.
Yeah. I mean, there's a familiarity. I mean, Mark Boutros has been my DP for just about everything I've ever done. I started Zombie Hunters with him, and he also shot Identity Check, and he shot Impervia for me, and Aemorraghe, and all my work, and Sling Spear, our duo project. But he and I have a shorthand. I've known him since the early 90s. We were in college together. And I've also worked with him for 15 years now, going on. So we have a shorthand. I can say, pull this back and Monster Lighter like this was, or Mr. Robot back to the corner, and he'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know if you always have that with you. You're on a new set and you hire a whole new crew. You may have a fantastic crew and they're going to give you gold, but that familiarity, that shorthand is definitely not going to be there until crews work with each other. The most relaxed major set I've ever been on was Law and Order, because that crew has been together for 21 years, on a SVU. I mean, they're all just looking at each other and like cracking jokes and laughing with each other, but they're getting all their work done at the same time. It's clockwork to them. They're timed perfectly, and that familiarity does come. And that's one of the biggest shows on television. So. You can also have that there.
Yeah, and then you also mentioned like if it becomes just about special effects, then it kind of loses its soul. I was just thinking like the later episodes of Game of Thrones became just about like dragons and like special effects, and originally it was more about the dialogue and the characters than even the magic or any of that. So.
Right, because what happened? The main writer, he didn't finish the books.
Yeah.
and people who were not at his level had to finish them. I'm not saying I could have done a better job, but I'm saying that it was night and day. If you're a fan of the show, night and day. When the books ended and the showrunners started writing it, it was done. It was done, because it didn't have the soul, it didn't have the spirit, it didn't have the daring. Martin's daring, killing off his main characters right away.
Yeah.
And some of the main characters are already dead before the book even starts. Who writes like that? Stephen King doesn't do that. So it's like, he takes gigantic chances, and he just didn't give a damn.
Yeah, and even gets like angry letters. Yeah, even gets like angry letters from fans, I think. Like when his first book came out. Yeah.
Yeah, that I think that's hilarious. It's said that he wrote those books so that they can never be turned to films. He's like, I'm going to make these so big and so outlandish and so gigantic that no one's ever going to want to bother. So they'll always exist only in people's minds. And then the technology came around to do it, and he was like, oh damn. And then they said, we're going to give you this much money. He was like, oh yeah, I'll take that. But his plan with the first couple of books was to make it so that they can never. I mean, the Iron Throne is supposed to be like 80 stories, 80 steps up. and
Yeah. And that's
so
why it
you
had
can't
such
film
crazy
all.
descriptions of the characters too, I guess. Like they
Right.
Tyrion had like one green eye and one black eye, and like all the
Yeah,
characters had like crazy descriptions too.
yeah, and Tyrion's nose is off by like the third book, I think,
Yeah.
like completely off. So he's just, he's like a skull, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Peter Dinklage wasn't going to go for that. I don't blame him.
Yeah. So you think good writing is at the core of every good production? Like if you don't have the good writing, then there's not much you can.
Yeah, yeah. You can have the most amazing actors in the world, and you just can't. I often tell the story about there's a film called Starship Invasions, which is one of my all time like most one of the films that affected me the most, only because it was the film that I first saw and I realized, oh my God, people make bad films. Because I was like 9 years old, I had no idea. And I watched it again as an adult, and it's terrible. It's an absolutely terribly produced, terribly written show. The space stations are discos. I mean, it's just awful. But it stars Christopher Lee and Robert Vaughn. I mean, these are seasoned actors. Christopher Lee tried. He tried, but there's nothing he could have done with it. They didn't give him anything to do with it. But even then, his presence is still Christopher Lee. It's still really cool. But it was just a nightmare. And that's why I adore that film. I adore that film. It taught me everything what you shouldn't do. Everyone should watch it. Starship Invasions. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, you can learn as much from the bad stuff as from the good stuff.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I could tell him. I mean, like, these guys tried. I mean, they really did try, but it was a terrible story and terribly written, and no one thought it through. But they went and did it, and they got investors. They went and did it. It's significantly low budget, but they went and did it. So I'll always give them credit for that. I mean, they had a worldwide release of a film. That's amazing.
Yeah,
anyone can do that. So
yeah, and I was just thinking I could learn to do it. I could look at what Tommy Wiseau did and learn not to do that. But then I was thinking, well, he actually did okay doing what he did. So like he got like a cult follow. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and he also raised over $3 million for that film. So it's like he had whatever that skill was for him to say, oh no, this is the script and I needed $3 million and to get that much money. Yeah, I gotta respect that.
Yeah, I mean, like he had motivation.
Director, but he had motivation out the ass. I mean, he was, I think he was selling leather jackets and watches and such, but like he was getting them like wholesale from like Yugoslavia, like some crazy thing. And he had all these connections to like do this. So he was selling all this stuff while they were filming that movie. Because that was like, that was his income. Like, that's a driven guy, man. And apparently he doesn't drink or do drugs or anything. He's just out there. More power to him. I can't tell him he didn't do it. He damn sure did.
Yeah. Yeah. But so I guess before we wrap up, you did mention the Reverend thing. I did want to get in a little bit of that, like, and then we can just wrap up that. So
yeah.
So you're a pagan Reverend, is what you said?
Yeah, I'm a Wiccan priest. I'm registered as such with nationwide and also within New York City. I actually had to go to City Hall. They bring out the big book, and you open it up and you sign your name, and it like goes back to like 1850 and So I'm like, all right, and that was kind of cool. The book was almost too big for the woman to drag out, and yes, I've been doing weddings, things like that. I've done this for a long time. The first one I did was for the husband wife team from Massgrave Pictures, Manny Serrano and Lindsay Serrano, who are directors in their own right, and you've probably seen their horror films. And Lindsay does these horror comedies that, I mean, they're just fantastic. So we met them doing at a convention, and they came and helped us with Zombie Hunters. A year later, I'm doing their wedding. So I kind of set it up to do that, to help them with their wedding. And I just got into it, and I only stopped for a couple of years, a little crisis of faith, little kind of, is this something I want to be promoting still? And, do I really believe in this? And, but I've come back around, and I realized that this is something that I get to do with people.
And
And
it's
I promised a couple of people years ago I would do their weddings, and both of them are getting married this year. So I have to hold true to my word. I said I'd do it, so I gotta do it.
yeah, and it's not just pagan weddings you do. You also do interfaith weddings or other religions.
I do interfaith. I do a non-denominational. I often tell people if they really want, like, if they're Catholic or they're very Christian, they should probably have a Christian minister doing that, because I think that someone who believes in their faith and believes in their God, it just adds to it. I think that would be, that's more of a connection to their higher being. I can certainly do that, but it would just be words. It wouldn't be heartfelt. Most of the time when I do this, though, it's usually non-religious. I let the people who are getting married, I was going to say husband and wife, but it's not always husband and wife. So so I let them do their own vows, and they say what they want. I give people complete freedom to do whatever they want in their ceremonies, and like, this is not about me, it's about you. And we've had some really beautiful things. Manny and Lindsay's ceremony, they did a hand fasting, and every member of their family came and tied a different colored knot with a different intention around their hands. And then I took it at the bottom, and I tied them all together, and we did it loose enough so they could pull their hands out of it later. And that's still hanging on their wall, that knot from that day from almost 11 years ago. So that, there's beautiful things you can do that aren't necessarily structured after a religion and things like that. So, but yeah, and now that there's no restrictions on who can marry who, that's, which is 50 years overdue, but that's a whole other thing too. It's beautiful to be a part of that as well.
And how did you get into paganism? Like, how did your beliefs and spirituality develop?
I had a close friend in college named Anna Fernandez, and we were walking around the campus, and she said, "Oh, well, this is where I took history class, and this is where I had drama class, and this is where I dedicated myself to the goddess." And I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" Right? So this is back in '93, and I kind of dismissed it. I was just like, I'm not going to be insulting, but this is nonsense. I was an atheist. I was like strict atheist. This is nonsense. But over the years, it kind of came to me, and I started seeing things around me, and I'm like, I think that I'm being drawn towards this. I think that I'm really, what she said, I think it's true. And Wicca is a nature-based religion. You can see it every aspect of the weather, of fertility, of planting cycles, of everything, from people to rocks to birds to the sky to the planets to the universe. It all makes sense in a certain way. And that religion celebrates that, and it's perfectly equal for every human being. There's no hierarchy. There's no popes. There's no one. Anyone can be a priest. Anyone can be a priestess. And everyone's it's just mutual respect. But then through the beautiful world of Facebook, I've got back in touch with Anna, and I said, "Guess what?" And I told her, I said, "Thank you for opening that door." And she's like, "Listen, I opened the door, but you were the one that decided to walk through it." And that was a beautiful thing that she said to me, and I've never forgotten that. And I'm just like, thank you. So we still talk to this day. I mean, I still have a good laugh about it. But yeah, I've been a member of that faith going on 24 years now. In May, it'll be 24 years. Yeah,
so were you raised like, because you mentioned popes, I just made me think maybe you were raised Catholic, I'm guessing, and did you break?
Oh, yeah, I was raised Irish Catholic through my father and Roman Catholic through my mother. So I had the best of both worlds. And all of the things that come with that, both good and very bad. And I also went to 12 years of Catholic school. And then when I was, after my music career and after I worked with the media group for almost 11 years, I started doing accounting, and I became an accountant for the Archdiocese of New York. I counted money at one of the high schools for 7 years. And that was trippy. And if nothing else convinced me before that I was right about my choice of religion, that absolutely convinced me that I was right in where I was heading. A religion that has no money and doesn't ask for money. I'm like, God doesn't need money, Yeah. So that was just my take on it. I'm sure other people have different experiences, but lifelong experience with the more of the negative aspects of that. Yeah.
But that's interesting that religion always becomes about money, because if you look at like most of the religions, like even Hinduism. I was revisiting the Upanishads recently, and there's the story of Najikitas, who was his father gave up all his possessions because he came from like a rich family, and then he learned about not being caught in the material wealth, or like the material pleasures, and having like the deeper spiritual wealth with that. And it was the same with the Buddha, you know, like he gave up all his possessions and went, and then, you know, Jesus Christ says, give up your possessions,
Right.
and you know, blessed are the poor, and it's harder for a rich man to go into heaven. Instead, that one line he says, yeah. So like that's why it's always interesting that it's like it's monetized in that way, kind of, because I feel like a lot of spirituality speaks against like the material.
Absolutely. That's a big spiritual journey. You'll find that in almost all cultures. You know, once you realize that there is more to this world than just having and having more and having more and having more. That's a really big deal. And even in the case of Jesus, I mean, I think that most of that's fictionalized, but I don't know if it's true or not. But in the story, you know, he was a carpenter, and at the time that meant he was a mason. So he had a really good union job. I mean, he was like, you know, it was like being like a level A guy with local 3, you know? So I mean, like he was making a lot of money, and he gave that up to become a rabbi. So, you know, and then he started seeing the horrific nature of the temples and how they were all money based, and that's why he said, listen, you know, that's which eventually got him killed. But you know, he wanted temple reform. You know, he wasn't looking to make a new religion. That's what he wanted. But that's a common theme, and I think that it really is important. One of the things that always drew me to Wicca. Now there are people who set up Wiccan churches and things like that. They're just out to get money. They're not true believers. They're just using the name. But there's no I don't have to pay anyone. You know, I mean, I'm 24 years in, and I haven't paid a dime. You know, I mean, if someone writes a book, I'll buy a book, because that's supporting an author. But I do that with fiction, so it doesn't matter. It makes a difference to me. But I'm not required to do that. You know, there's no requirements whatsoever except you know, don't proselyte, don't evangelize the faith, which is a big thing. Never spread it, and just, you know, never harm anyone. I mean, I think that's how every faith should be stripped down. Don't hurt anybody. You know. Yeah.
Do unto others as you want done to yourself.
Right. Precisely. Yeah. And that's the whole of the law. And it's a very important thing. And that's what drew me to it. And I said, this is definitely for me. I gave it a year, and I asked the gods that I believe in. And I said, listen, you guys got to show me, if I'm going to believe in this, you got to show me whenever I need reassurance, you got to show me something physical, because that's the only way I'm going to believe this. And damned if every single time I asked didn't show up. I mean, the craziest things. And I'm like, inexplicable things, you know? And after a while, I just said, okay, I get the point. I'm with it. I'm with you for life. And I never looked back, and I never regretted it.
Yeah. And I think that religion, like when people pray to different gods, like it's kind of all accessing the same, it's invoking the same energy, but like it manifests in different ways. Like I've chanted to Lord Ganesh and like some other Hindu gods, and I've definitely like he's supposed to be the remover of obstacles, and I felt like through chanting his name, like a lot of my anxiety's gone away, and I feel like a lot of the obstacles that were in myself have kind of gone away. And other people, I have friends who are like Christian and Muslim and stuff like that, and they've talked about praying and having that, like certain things work out their way because they prayed. And I always think like that's kind of invoking like the same kind of energy, just like in a different way.
Right. It could ultimately be that there's only one reality. There was, you know, it's believed there was one spark that set off everything in the universe. So there could be one reality behind that. Chances are it's probably true. There's only one, you know, or a reality that's so complex we can't understand it. It's why we make up different religions, because it's just what speaks best to us. And because the complexities of, you know, when you think about everything, life, the universe, and everything, right? You go back to sci-fi. It's the things that create physics and light and the planets and life and you know, joy and emotion and love. I mean, all those things. I don't know what kind of system can create all those things. I can't conceive of that, and no one can. So we give it names. and that should be enough. There should be enough. And ultimately, we may all be talking about the exact same thing. I think you have a very good point. It's probably all the same thing, the same intent, the same place, the same notion. It's just worded differently or looks different, but it's probably all the same thing.
Yeah, and maybe everybody's belief is kind of true for them. Like wherever they believe they go, where they die, they go. Yeah,
could very possibly be. And my faith preaches reincarnation, which I wholeheartedly believe in. So I know that I'm just running around in this shell for this life, and as soon as I'm done, I'm something else. What that is, I have no idea.
Yeah,
because I really can't piece what I was before. But that's the only thing that makes sense to me. That's what speaks to me. So I'm not going to have a heaven. I'm not going to have anything like this. But I'm going to have a series of lives, and I hope that the concept is you try to do a little bit better with each one, until ultimately there is nirvana. I'm speaking of so
yeah, like sort of making the heaven on earth, like through the
right, or just heaven throughout the galaxies. I mean, like or throughout all of creation. I may be reincarnated by as something on a planet 800 light years from now.
Yeah. Writing a sci-fi about Earthlings or something.
Exactly, making these crazy things that used to be apes and now they're people, and it's like, what the hell are you writing about? Evolution. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, and they're on these iPhone things. What's that?
Yeah, these little phones, and it's like that's stupid. Yeah. So who knows? I don't know. I'm open to the ideas, but I have no idea. No.
Yeah. Well, we definitely give the audience a lot of deep things to think about. So
again, I hope so.
Yeah.
Brother. I hope so.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts or things you like to say?
Yeah. I mean, we're just stay creative, and if you want to try something, try it. If you want to draw something, draw it. If you want to make a film, just do it. Be creative. There's going to be no better time than when we come out the other side of this pandemic. There's going to be no better time to create art. You can be doing that right now. This is most artists I know are doing that. We all worked on projects during this. We did it all remotely, and people came up with beautiful things. But ultimately, just stay creative. Stay understanding, and just be kind. Just be kind. That's the only thing I can say to anybody. And I'm saying that more in the last year than I've ever said before in my life. Just try to understand other people. Just be kind, be understanding, and then make some art along the way. And then everything else, everything else in life just becomes that much more easy. That's what I'm finding, at least.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It's a good chat. Yeah. And people can keep updated Patrick Devaney on social media.
Oh, yeah. Just look for me. And you can also go to pdevaney.com, or you can go to Vimeo and look up Devarez Films, and you'll see everything that I can post publicly right now. And there's also a link to a showcase that showcases all of my work. So it's all free, and anyone can check it out. So it's Devarez Films at Vimeo, or you can go to pdevaney.com and get more information about me. All
right. And for those of you who want to keep updated with BSing with Sean K, it's BS 'ING with SEANK on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. And also on Facebook, there's the BSing with Sean K. And on Instagram, I'm SKNEESE1989. And SeanNeese.com also has everything I do, too, like my writing and podcast and everything else.
That's cool.
And yes, so that about does it for this episode. I'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sean.
BSing with who? BSing with what?